We're going to get started with our public meeting tonight. This evening, we're going to be discussing the Community Development Block Grant Program and our 5-year consolidated plan, which will guide how to invest those federal funds in Gloucester. So this is federal funding, cannot be applied to the general budget. And so updating our plan is required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So while this is a requirement, it's also an opportunity to have a community conversation about how we can best invest these funds. So the feedback that you share with us tonight and through our survey that we have going through February 25th will shape this plan and how those funds are invested. CDBG funding and in general the federal government can be a little complicated. So we have procured some experts in CDBG planning from Barrett LLC who are guiding us through this process. So this evening we're going to start with a presentation from Barrett about the CDBG program. Then we're going to have a discussion about all the different areas where this funding can be spent and try and identify some needs that we want to prioritize in the plan. And then we'll have some time at the end if you just have additional comments or questions that you want to enter for the record. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Fiona from Barrett LLC, the project manager for this process.
Thank you, Alex. I'm going to just share my screen. So as Alex said, my name is Fiona. I'm from Barrett Planning Group. I'm an assistant planner, and I just wanted to take. All right, how's this? Better? Okay, great. I'm just going to take about 15 or 20 minutes to give a brief overview of the CDBG program, how the City of Gloucester has used CDBG funds in the past, and then we will come together with both our online and in-person participants to kind of go over some questions and how you think these CDBG funds can be used for the 2025 to 2030 cycle. We have the event overview in person, but for those of us online, I'll just briefly say that after the agenda and our group activity, we will come together and do a report out, and then there will be a time for general testimony, and then we'll wrap up the event. So the 5-year consolidated plan is a prerequisite for receiving funds through HUD's Community Development Block Grant Program. There are several components to the final consolidated plan that is submitted to HUD, but a huge part of it is the public input to understand the community's strengths, needs, and opportunities for this grant. Through the citizen participation and consultation process, the city presents a comprehensive strategy for how the CDBG funding can be used to address its housing and community development needs. The comprehensive strategy includes the determination of needs through a snapshot of socioeconomic, demographic, and market conditions, which then will reveal priorities for goal setting. Once these goals are established, we will decide on strategies for how to allocate resources. And then an implementation plan will be created for the administering of programs and projects. And finally, an evaluation of implementation from year to year will also happen. As much as possible, a community should quantify performance goals and make targets measurable and attainable. The target, for example, can be the number of substandard housing units that can be made safe and sanitary in the timeline of a consolidated plan, or it could be a range of affordable housing units that can be added to the city's housing supply. While the consolidated plan focuses on the broad priorities and goals for the grant funds over a 5-year period, an annual action plan is submitted every year describing the specifics of the plan activities related to the broader goals in the consolidated plan. So this current consolidated plan writing process will result in the 5-year consolidated plan document and the first year action plan. Taking a step back, I want to provide some context for the Community Block Development Grant Program as a whole. It's been around since 1974 and is one of the major grants that HUD distributes on a state, county, and municipal basis. Gloucester is a CDBG entitlement community because it meets the population threshold set by HUD. The amount granted by HUD to each entitlement community is based on a formula that considers factors like the extent of poverty in its population, the extent of overcrowding in its households, the overall age of housing in Gloucester's housing supply, and the rate of population growth. CDBG as a program is intentionally flexible to give a municipality freedom to design its strategies and fund allocation plan in a way that makes sense for their current needs. So a consolidated plan and the strategies and actions in it is going to vary greatly from municipality to municipality. The city can also use consolidated planning to determine if the city should apply for Section 108 funds from HUD. So these loans use existing CDBG grant money to back federally guaranteed loans that are often used for larger projects that require larger budgets. And it essentially is an opportunity to make the most out of CDBG dollars for project funding in the short-term future. The consolidated plan must describe how CDBG grants will be used within 4 categories of projects. There's housing, economic development, public services, and public facilities and infrastructure. An eligible project must fall into one of these categories, but it also has other requirements that it must meet. One of them is that 70% of fund activity must benefit lower income people as defined by HUD's regional household income calculations, which we will talk about soon. Every activity must meet one of 3 national objectives. The national objectives are that the activity must 1, benefit low and moderate income persons, 2, aid in the prevention or elimination of slums or blight, and 3, meet an urgent need. And the final requirement is that the use of funds for public or social service improvement projects is capped at 15% of the overall grant amount. And looking overall at the 3 national objectives, the use of urgent need as an objective is fairly rare. It's mostly used for emergency situations brought on by natural disasters or other very disruptive emergency situations where there is no other source of funding besides what's available through CDBG. And then HUD defines slums and blighted areas as places where dwellings are unsafe or unhealthy due to several factors like overcrowding, poor design, lack of ventilation, general dilapidation. There's more characteristics, but those are just a few. So going back to the low and moderate income national objective, here are the regional household income limits for Gloucester. The categories are defined as extremely low income, very low income, and low income. The percentage values have to do with a comparison to the area median income that's also designated by HUD. So for example, all of the income limits in the low income bracket, all the way to the right, are 80% of the area median income for a household of that same size. It's worth noting that these values are based on regional income trends. So looking at the median household income estimated from the 2023 US Census for Gloucester, which is $87,898, many households would qualify as low income and therefore would qualify as ideal beneficiaries for CDBG projects. So this meeting and this consolidated planning process is relevant only to the city of Gloucester and their objectives relating to their CDBG funds. There is also an ongoing 5-year consolidated plan for the North Shore Home Consortium, which is run through the city of Peabody. Gloucester does receive funds from the Home Consortium to create affordable rental and ownership housing for low and very low income households. Home funds do not apply for economic development, public facilities, or infrastructure projects like CDBG funds do. And there will also be opportunities for participation in that consolidated planning process, but tonight we are just speaking about the city of Gloucester and their goals. The timeline for the Gloucester CDBG Consolidated Plan is fairly short, with the first segment concentrating on the needs assessment, citizen participation, and monitoring plan. This meeting falls into the work we're currently doing on updating the citizen participation plan and how this process can be made more accessible over the next 5 years for individuals and service providers looking to engage or apply for CDBG grants. Also importantly, speaking to all of you today in person or online, will ensure we're not missing any outstanding need based on the more quantitative research-based process of the needs assessment that is currently ongoing. Beginning next month in March, we will take the information collected from the needs assessment and the community engagement, which will include group interviews, feedback from this meeting, and an ongoing community survey that we have information about at the end of this presentation to hone in on strategies in the plan for project funding using CDBG grants. The draft consolidated plan will be available for public comment in late March. The public comment period also includes a public hearing, which will be taking place on March 24th. That will kick off the 30-day public comment period. We will introduce the draft plan at that meeting. It will already have been written in its draft form. Public comments will be incorporated into the final version of the plan, which will then be submitted to HUD by May 15th of this year. Much of this 2025 to 2030 consolidated plan will look back at previous funding years to see how this grant cycle can be a continuation of the work service providers in the city of Gloucester has already been doing for a number of years. We will ask later on about some projects you may think of to address Gloucester's highest needs, but some examples of previous projects in past years include major work on housing rehabilitation, resulting in the improvement of 52 units in 2023, and the first-time home buyers program, which helped 5 households in 2023 and 10 households the year before in purchasing their homes. Gloucester also funds projects from service providers that implement invaluable services to residents. Just to highlight a few, one of the many things Action Inc. does is helping with tenant-based rental and mortgage assistance programming. The Open Door used CDBG funds to support the food pantry to improve food security for residents in Gloucester. And finally, the Wellspring House has used funds to support the homelessness prevention and family stabilization program. This slide just shows how the city of Gloucester has distributed funds across the 4 major project categories over the past few years. The majority of funding goes towards the rehabilitation and first-time homebuyers program, leading to the rehabilitation of over 50 units in 2023, as I mentioned previously. And these numbers vary slightly from year to year. So by the time the draft plan comes out in late March, we will have a better idea of how it looks for the 2025 to 2030 cycle. So having laid out the groundwork for the context of the CDBG program overall and how Gloucester has used these funds previously, we are hoping to get your input on some outstanding community and housing development needs that fit the national objectives I talked about. The citizen participation process really helps inform what projects take priority over the next 5 years. While we look forward to the public comment process in March that will solicit feedback on at that time, existing plan. This moment to hear from you about potential goals and strategies while the plan is being developed is very important. So I had some slides set up in case we had more in person and we needed to kind of break up into more groups. But instead, we are going to try and facilitate a hybrid discussion of different questions relating to each of the 4 topics. So I will do a brief overview of the questions we will discuss and then go back to housing as our first topic, and we will hopefully be able to manage taking comments from those of you online and those of you in person. So some of the questions that we are asking for housing are, what are the most common housing problems or concerns in Gloucester? What changes have you seen in the housing situation over the last 5 years? And what are some projects you would like to see implemented to address these changes and concerns? Housing projects, just to give some examples of what they can target, they can address reducing and ending homelessness, addressing emergency shelter and transitional housing opportunities, helping low-income families avoid becoming homeless, public policies that serve as barriers to affordable housing, or even something as specific as the reduction of lead-based paint hazards in homes. We'll also talk about economic development. We'll ask what are the most common economic challenges you see today, what industries or economic sectors are growing or shrinking, and what are some projects you'd like to see implemented to address these changes and concerns. Economic development projects can target assistance to local businesses, local entrepreneurs, job creation, and employment training. For social services, we will ask, what are the most common social service issues or needs today? Which populations seem to need the most help? And what are some projects you would like to see implemented to address these changes and concerns? Social service projects that qualify for CDBG funding can include projects that target food insecurity, after school and early education services, or homelessness prevention. And then finally, for public facilities and infrastructure, we will ask, what do you see as the most common types of public work needs today? Where in Gloucester do you see particularly obvious needs? And what are some projects you would like to see implemented to address these needs? Public infrastructure and facilities projects can target public facilities like the library, senior center, city-owned parking, and park and recreation spaces, water and sewer infrastructure improvement projects, and finally, improvements to streets and sidewalks. So before we get into our conversation, I wanted to encourage, if there are any outstanding questions or concerns, please feel free to visit the Grants Division page of the City of Gloucester's website or contact Pete or Zoe with the contact information on the slide. And then finally, we also have another opportunity ongoing to share feedback through a community survey that is live for anyone to take until February 25th. So with all of that being said, yes. Okay. So we will start with the topic of housing. I might have to stop sharing my screen and then reshare just so I have access to my notes. We'll be documenting all of the responses for our record and then share out main takeaways once we finish going through all of the topics in a report back. So we will start with in-person contributions and then we will move online. For those of you online who have a comment or something you'd like to respond to, please just raise your hand through the Zoom and Zoe will be able to allow you to speak or be unmuted. Let me just reshare my screen. So thinking about housing, what are some of the most common housing problems and concerns in Gloucester? I know based on those of you who are attending in person, you might have already answered some of these questions, and we do have record of that. So if you don't want to repeat yourself, that is completely fine, but if you'd also like to share again, we will be more than happy to record that. Sure.
Thank you. This is, I think, a little bit easier. First of all, I really think continuing and expanding the rehab program is a really important one because I think not enough people in the community understand that there's a housing rehab program that they might be eligible for, and it could even be expanded because if we're talking about housing that's not well kept, we need to find that housing and find out if people are eligible and facilitate them applying. In addition, I think a couple of things that I think about over the events of the last year is we're so aware that there are many seniors who are so-called overhoused. They live in housing that is too big for the one or two people who are still in that housing. And I think a program to encourage the conversion of that single family home into two or even three family homes so that the senior could remain in their home. Maybe they stay in the main house and there's a ADU size kind of place added, or maybe it's the reverse. Maybe there's an ADU added to the house and the senior is happy in that setting and the rest of the house is then available for rent to a different size family than that. A piece of that that I wonder about is if it's necessary to have some kind of management option to help them make that, especially for a senior who might be open to that, but doesn't have family around to help manage all the finances of how you would set up that kind of a conversion. We have excellent senior housing in the Cape Ann area in Gloucester, but the waiting is 5 or 6 years. So that in fact, you can't just deal with the problem of seniors overhoused by waiting for them to be able to move into an alternative setting because those alternative settings don't necessarily come very readily. And then a third thing that closer still, woo, even for me, wow. Thank you, Peter. Uh, the third thing I wonder about is if we are so fortunate in April as to pass the multifamily zoning option, is there a incentive kind of program that could be added to that to help people who live in the district who might be thinking about wanting to go to a second or a third unit, but don't know how they would finance it? So is there a creative program that we could build that would incentivize that by helping make that accomplishment? And so that's just an idea that, of course, would need a lot more fleshing out to actually make it real. But those are some of the things I think about in terms of housing.
So with no outstanding comments for the topic of housing, I guess I'll open it to the other questions as well. I know I just listed the first one, but based on how many participants we can have, I can just say, are there any comments about the questions that we have on this entire slide? I'll leave that for a moment. Okay. Seeing none, I'll move on to the next slide. Oops. So on the topic of economic development, reviewing these questions that we have for you. If anybody would like to take the floor and provide comment, we would love to hear your input.
Laura O'Neill asks, what is your confidence that there will be CDBG funds available in the coming year, given the possible changes in federal funding?
It's a very good question. I think we're going to continue on in this process of planning as if the funds will be available. And as we learn more information, we will, respond to that. I don't know that I can say with a level of certainty my amount of confidence, but it's certainly something we're thinking about. Alex just wanted to note that this whole process is a good opportunity to advocate for why cities like Gloucester need these funds. Oh, I'm so sorry. So to restate, we will continue on with the consolidated planning process as a way to advocate for cities like Gloucester and why they need funds like the ones accessible through the CDBG program. When we learn information, we will respond to that, but I am unsure of what will happen. We will just have to continue on and see. Okay. So we can move on to the next topic of social services. So we can take a moment to review these questions. And if you all have any feedback or comments, please just raise your hand online or feel free to speak in person. Yeah.
So now I'll put my domestic abuse prevention hat on and speak to the importance of continuing the kind of support that I know Hawk has received from CDBG funds in the past. And also COVID changed lots of things. So all of Hawk's services are still very much available, but more of them are available online, and to have additional resources available so that the Hawk advocate can actually be present here in town more frequently, I think would be a great use of some additional funds, especially since finally the craziness of having the courts down the road in Salem and Peabody rather than here is going to change, and the courts will be coming, I think, back to the Gloucester area sometime in the middle of this month. So the continued support for domestic abuse prevention and response services, I think, is very important. And also, I would encourage the exploration with groups like Unity, who specifically do youth-related work. I think there are they're growing mental health and other social service needs amongst the youth community, and I'm sure Unity does not have as many resources as they could use to address those needs. So thank you very much.
Laura, you should be able to talk now.
Okay, great, thank you. On behalf of Pathways for Children, I'd like to thank you for the funding we've received to support our out-of-school time care programs. And just to say that those continue to be really relevant and important in helping parents and caregivers be able to pursue their own needs and again, be able to be gainfully employed and hopefully put a roof over their heads. So just want to say that affordable childcare and out of school time care continues to be a top priority for many of the families we serve.
Thank you, Laura. Okay. So we can move on to our final topic. Oops. Of public facilities and infrastructure. we have our questions posted. If you all have any comments to make. So then I guess I'll pose one final question, just about what are some of the ways that the city of Gloucester can communicate with those who would benefit from applying to CDBG funding for any of the projects that fall under these 4 topic categories. If there are any comments on ways to facilitate communication in the grant application cycle or just accessing information? Okay, so I'll just do a quick report back. So for our conversations about housing, continuing and expanding the rehab program is really important. Not enough people in the community understand that there is a rehab program that people are eligible for. There are seniors that are overhoused that have a desire to downsize, and encouraging the conversion of single family homes to one with multiple units is something that we should consider. Excellent elder housing options exist, but the wait lists for those options are very long. So maybe even exploring a multifamily zoning option to facilitate the addition of new units through ADUs or the conversion of existing single family homes is something that could be helpful. For economic development, we received a comment on understanding how those within the fishing industry could benefit from CDBG funds, and making sure that we have specific outreach for those in the fishing community. For social services, there was mention of Hawk funding. Hawk services are very much available, and additional resources available should be explored so that the Hawk advocate can be more present in town, and continuing the support of domestic abuse prevention and the resources that already exist for that. Exploring how to expand mental health and social service needs, and also a comment from Laura about pathways and the funding that they're receiving, and how existing funding is relevant and important in helping parents and caregivers pursue their own needs. And then finally, for the communication question, Gloucester Connections in the library was brought up as a way to reach many social services and advocacy groups. So I will thank you so much for your comments. I will shift over to the community survey slide to say once again, if you would like to participate in taking the survey, the questions in that are a little more directed than the open conversation that we tried to facilitate today. So hopefully that can get you thinking in different ways about the CDBG consolidated plan process. And we thank you for attending. I guess we'll leave open an opportunity for general testimony. If there's any general comments that anyone would like to make at this point. So I think with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you so much for those of you who attended online and in person. And we look forward to holding another event March 24th. right here, once the draft plan is ready to be shared. So thank you so much.